What if I told you that the soul you've been, told to guard and protect your entire life is actually just a temporary cosmic hard drive?
Yeah.
And your actual eternal identity is something entirely different.
Right. It completely flips everything we usually assume about human existence.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking a highly specific, deeply complex philosophical framework that redefines what it actually means to be alive.
Yeah, today we have a really fascinating source. It's a video lecture led by a speaker named Arislav, and he breaks down the Slavic-Vedic understanding of reality.
Right.
He covers the supreme creator and the actual mechanics of human identity. And I have to say, this isn't just a surface level philosophical chat.
Yeah, no.
It's a highly technical, almost mechanistic explanation of how pure consciousness interfaces with dense matter. It really challenges you to completely reevaluate your fundamental sense of self.
Okay, let's unpack this. Aristotle starts by setting the stage with the nature of the supreme creator, right?
That does, yeah.
And for anyone who studied comparative theology, the concepts here bypass the whole anthropomorphic idea of a deity sitting in judgment on a throne.
Oh, absolutely. The text refers to the supreme as Visavishni or Rod, and it describes it not as a being, but as a universal fire.
A universal fire. I love that terminology.
Right, because it emphasizes a non-dual absolute. I mean, Rod encompasses literally everything.
The good and the bad.
Exactly. The creative and the destructive, the internal, the external, life, death. There's no external adversary in this framework. Everything is fueled by the exact same absolute source.
Okay, so from that infinite fire, you get these individual autonomous points of consciousness.
Right, which the text calls sparks.
Sparks. So if you and I and everyone listening are independent sparks born directly from a perfect, non-dual universal fire, we hit an immediate philosophical roadblock here.
The problem of suffering.
Yes, because pure energy vibrating at the highest possible frequency, it doesn't experience limitation. Yet here we are, sitting in a universe defined by friction, limitation, decay, and, well, profound suffering.
Right.
So if we are perfect sparks, how on earth did we end up in a material universe that's characterized by such heavy resistance?
Well, the source material addresses this origin story in a really cool way. It explains that the material universe isn't an accident. It's actually a highly engineered developmental curriculum.
Okay, so it's intentional.
Very intentional. Originally, all these sparks resided in the spiritual reality, operating in complete unity with that universal fire. But consciousness implies autonomy.
Right. You have a mind of your own.
Exactly. And a specific subset of these sparks developed a desire for total independence. They essentially wanted to simulate godhood.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they wanted a reality where there's absolutely no one above them, a realm where they could be the prime architects of their own experience.
Wait, so the material universe is essentially a cosmic sandbox built by a patient parent for rebellious teenagers who wanted their own space.
That is basically the perfect analogy, yeah.
But how does a loving creator justify dropping them into such a harsh sandbox? Because you can't simulate godhood in an absolute realm where everything is already perfect.
No, you can't. If these sparks demanded a place to play the architect, they couldn't do it in their pure energetic form. They would just instantly consume or transcend whatever boundaries they tried to set.
So they needed restrictions.
Profound restrictions, which is the exact function of this material universe. The Supreme Creator literally manifested this dense physical reality specifically to accommodate these divergent sparks.
Wow.
It's an environment of low frequency and heavy matter where the illusion of separation is actually possible. And the Creator allows this because spiritual maturity, it can't be programmed.
You have to learn the hard way.
Exactly. It has to be earned through experience. The sparks have to play out this fantasy of separation, exhaust their desire for localized control, and eventually realize they want to return to the source.
That completely flips the script. It means the material world isn't, it's not a punishment for original sin.
Nope.
It's an educational facility.
Exactly.
And the text introduces a fascinating secondary group into this sandbox, right? The rescue team.
Yeah, the rescue team. So after this material universe was constructed, a smaller, distinct group of sparks actually approached the Creator and volunteered to enter it.
But they didn't want to play God.
No, they had zero desire to play God. Their sole intention in coming down into this material density is to serve as a disruption mechanism.
To wake people up.
Right. They infiltrate the sandbox to wake up the sparks who have gotten completely lost in their own artificial game. The ones who forgot their eternal fire and now actually believe they are just the physical avatars they're playing.
Okay, I want you listening to really reflect on this for a second. When you look at your own life and your own internal motivations, do you feel more like a rebellious spark? Like, do you have that relentless drive to master your environment, build an empire, exert control?
The architect mindset.
Exactly. Or do you feel the resonance of the rescue team? That deep-seated urge to dismantle illusions and pull others out of the simulation. It's a profound way to look at yourself.
It really is. And that tension between wanting to build the illusion and wanting to break it, I mean, that's basically the core dynamic of all human history.
Totally. But okay, let's talk mechanics. Operating in this sandbox requires specialized equipment. If you are a spark of pure, high-frequency spirit, you can't just directly touch low-frequency physical matter.
No, you would literally pass right through it, or it would combust.
Right, so you need an interface, a way to actually touch the sand. Which brings us to how the text explains the biological body, because it totally dismisses the idea that the body is you.
Yeah, the biological form is strictly a vehicle, like clothing or a car, or really the text's best metaphor is a deep-sea diving bell.
Oh, a diving bell.
Yeah, imagine you are pure energy descending into this crushing, dense atmosphere. You require a highly pressurized, restrictive biological vessel just to survive the environment.
That makes a lot of sense.
And Aristotle actually points to near-death experiences as evidence for this.
Oh, right, where consciousness watches the doctors working on the physical body.
Exactly. It reliably detaches and observes the clinical death of the body from a third-person perspective. It shows a mechanical separation.
But I have to push back on this purely abstract view for a second, because right here, right now, I feel like my physical body, if I stub my toe, my divine spark isn't what's screaming in pain. It feels incredibly real to me.
Well, and it has to. That diving bell metaphor is precise, but it introduces a huge operational problem.
Which is?
If the spark knows it's just wearing a diving bell, it won't take the dangers of the ocean seriously. It won't fight for survival. To actually function in the material world, the spark must be entirely convinced that it is the vessel.
Enter the false ego.
Enter the false ego. When the spark enters the material plane, it gets encased in this subtle shell made up of the material mind and the false ego.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's exactly like putting on a VR headset. The false ego is basically parasitic software. It intercepts the spark's pure consciousness, hardwires it into the biological nervous system, and tricks your consciousness into believing the game is real. If you didn't have that software making you feel a stubbed toe as a literal threat to your existence, you wouldn't play. You wouldn't maintain the avatar.
You just take the headset off. So the false ego binds you to the survival imperatives of the diving bell. It is the absolute tether to material reality.
But it can't be a perfect seal, right? Otherwise,
yeah.
no one would ever wake up. The rescue team would just be stuck.
Right, they'd be totally ineffective. So the text adds a crucial nuance. This subtle shell has structural vulnerabilities. There are gaps or permeable openings in the false ego.
Okay.
And these gaps allow the pure original light of the spark to radiate outward. The more gaps you have, the more of your true self actually shines through.
And there's a specific term for these gaps, right?
Yeah, traditionally in the Slavic-Vedic texts, they are called Luchi, which literally translates to rays.
Rays of light. That's beautiful.
It is. But Aristotle actually brings a really sharp, almost humorous critique here regarding another prominent figure, Alexander Yuryevich Kinovich.
Oh, the terminology debate.
Yeah. Aristotle points out that Kinovich unnecessarily rebranded these traditional Luchi as Energons.
Energons, like Transformers.
Basically.
Yeah.
And Aristotle is super frustrated by it because when we obscure ancient functional terminology with sci-fi jargon, we lose the mechanistic clarity. Luchi perfectly describes light penetrating a dense barrier. Changing it to Energons just treats a spiritual mechanic like some kind of commercial product.
Right. It totally commodifies the philosophy.
Yeah.
But okay, setting the terminology debate aside, the fundamental goal here is structural. We are tasked with widening those rays, poking more holes in our own VR headset so we can perceive the reality outside the game.
Exactly.
And understanding the mechanics of that illusion brings us to probably the most radical distinction in the entire source material.
Oh, definitely. The profound architectural difference between the soul and the spirit.
Yeah, because in Western thought, we usually use soul and spirit completely interchangeably.
We do.
If someone talks about saving their soul or nourishing their spirit, they mean the exact same ethereal concept of self. But Aristotle draws a massive, distinct line between the two.
He argues that confusing the soul and the spirit is a catastrophic misunderstanding of cosmic mechanics.
So break that down for us. What is the spirit in this framework?
The text is incredibly rigid here. The spirit, which is referred to as Duk, or Jiva Atma, that is the actual spark.
The eternal peace.
Right. It is your true identity. It's that indestructible piece of the universal fire. It possesses eternal kinetic energy. It was never born. It can never die. And its core nature cannot be corrupted or taken from you.
And I love the use of Jiva Atma there. It's a brilliant synthesis because it bridges the Slavic-Vedic framework with Eastern Sanskrit traditions. You know, Jiva being the living entity and Atma being the pure self.
Exactly.
So the spirit, the Jiva Atma, is the eternal player wearing the VR headset. So then what mechanically is the soul?
Okay, so the soul, or dusha, is completely different. It is a temporary, highly complex, energetic construct.
Temporary.
Yes. According to the text, the soul is basically a collection of subtle bodies, your mental, emotional, and astral layers. And you are given this soul only for the lifespan of this current material universe.
Wow.
It functions strictly as an energetic ledger, like a diary.
So wait, let me jump in with my usual question here. So what does this all mean? Because if the soul is just a metaphysical gradebook, does that mean you can lose it?
Yes.
You can actually lose it.
You can. It is a highly compressed battery of all your evolutionary data, every moral victory, every lesson learned over millions of lifetimes, which makes it the most valuable commodity in the material universe.
Right.
And the text explicitly warns that there are advanced, localized entities, essentially higher demons, who actively seek to acquire that data.
Because they're lazy.
Basically, yes. These dark forces don't want to do the agonizing spiritual labor of building their own subtle bodies. They want the kinetic spiritual power, the mystical abilities, the worldly success, without the evolutionary work.
They want to copy your saved game.
Exactly. They want the shortcut. To get it, they try to buy your soul in exchange for temporary wealth or power in this life.
Which is the literal origin of the Faustian bargain.
Yeah.
Selling your soul to the devil.
Right.
And for the listener, this reframes that classic trope so intensely because we are culturally conditioned to think of selling your soul as eternal damnation in a lake of fire, right?
Right. The medieval torture narrative.
But Aristotle's framework discards that entirely. It replaces it with something far more logical and honestly way more terrifying in a tedious way.
Sure.
What actually happens if you sell your soul?
Well, because your spirit, the Jiva Atma, is eternal, it doesn't cease to exist. It can't burn in a lake of fire. But what the dark forces do is strip the dusha, the soul, away from your spirit.
They take the hard drive.
They take the hard drive, all your accumulated progress is wiped, the localized human avatar gets its temporary wealth, but when that biological diving bell finally collapses,
The eternal spirit wakes up totally naked.
completely naked, and without the mental and astral bodies to process complex reality, the spirit is sent back to the absolute beginning of material evolution.
Absolute zero.
Yeah, you have to start over as basic matter, just raw chemistry.
You literally become a rock.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
Over staggering epochs of time, the spark has to slowly learn geometric ordering until it evolves into a crystal.
Wow.
Then, once that ethereal foundation is built, it can graduate to a plant, learning to interact with light and biology.
Millions of lifetimes as a plant.
Millions. Then it moves to the animal kingdom to build an astral body, emotion, fear, instinct. And only after enduring all of that survival trauma can it finally reconstruct a mental body and incarnate back as a human.
It's not eternal damnation. You just have your cosmic saved game completely wiped, and you are forced to play the tutorial of existence all over again, starting as a rock.
It is an incredibly tedious, billion-year evolutionary detour.
That is mind-bending. So to recap this massive journey we've just been on, you listening, you are an indestructible spark of a universal fire.
Right.
You are wearing a temporary biological suit, basically a VR headset driven by a false ego, navigating a material sandbox just to fill out a cosmic gradebook called a soul.
That is the architecture in a nutshell.
It's staggering.
And the value of this framework is how it forces a total paradigm shift regarding adversity.
How so?
Well, the friction of daily life, the profound losses, the systemic failures, it's not a punishment. It's the exact, highly calibrated curriculum our rebellious sparks need to spiritually develop.
It gives you the operational distance to step back and say, okay, this anger or fear isn't me, it's just my biological avatar.
Exactly. It pushes us to poke more holes in that false ego so our true light, our Luchi, can shine through.
That is so empowering. But before we wrap up, I have to leave you all with one final, deeply provocative detail buried in Yaroslav's text. And this is the one that really got me. We established the biological body as a temporary vessel.
Right.
But the speaker casually mentions that if we didn't have the false ego holding us together, our bodies would literally fall apart into spare parts.
Because it's not just dead meat.
No. The physical body itself is made up entirely of sleeping sparks.
The ones at the very beginning of their journey.
Yes. If this text is right, every single atom, every strand of DNA, every microscopic cell in your diving bell is actually a dormant divine entity. They are just starting their own billion-year evolutionary journey as basic matter.
Your advanced consciousness is acting as the gravitational center for all of them.
Exactly. You aren't just an individual. The concept of the individual self is an illusion of the false ego. You're actually a walking, breathing universe guiding billions of sleeping souls while you navigate the sandbox.
It changes everything.
It really does. So mull that over. Next time you look in the mirror, look past the skin. Look past the tired eyes. How does knowing that you are a conscious captain orchestrating a galaxy of dormant spirits change the way you look at yourself today?
Such a great question.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.